Our last portion of the lecture will involve exploring relationships beyond the community and intertribal connections. Music and ceremony also create and maintain relationships between tribes. There are over 150 distinct indigenous peoples across North America. Many were connected through complex forms of trade before contact, and interactions have intensified in the present. Here are some examples of how music acknowledges and instantiates relationships between communities. First, we have the ghost dance, which originated in the 1880s. The founder of the ghost dance was a Paiute man named Wovoka, or Jack Wilson. He shared his vision with other Great Basin groups, and the religion spread further afield as time went on. You can read more about the ritual, the ideas, the kind of movement, and the song-connected communities related to the ghost dance. Next, we have the Ojibwe drum dance. This emerged among Santee Dakota in the late 19th century and is associated with intertribal peace. This drum dance spread to various tribes. One group would give another the drum song, the drum, along with instructions regarding ceremonies and songs. Groups would check in with one another to ensure preservation of the repertoire. And lastly, we have the powwow. This draws on plains culture and has been adopted across the United States and Canada, even in areas where dance and singing traditions are very different. This allows people who learn the core styles to participate anywhere across the continent. So powwow is an intertribal practice. There are differences among powwows. The northern powwows related to the northern United States and Canada have a higher singing style. And then the southern powwows, which happen south of the Kansas-Oklahoma border, have a lower singing style. There are local differences as well. Tara Browner said, "For most Native people, tribal identity comes first, Indian identity second, and national identity, American or Canadian, third." This is shaped by particular groups' experiences under colonialism. Now let's look at what we'll call larger imaginaries. Imaginaries are groups so large and widely dispersed, it's not possible to know all of their members. The interaction with these groups involves orientation to people one has never met and never will. Larger imaginaries come into being thanks to mass mediation. Broadcast performances, albums, singles, etc. presume the existence of imaginaries and help bring them into being. They are plural and overlapping. The artist's choices orient their music toward one audience or another, and the author uses album titles as examples. Imaginaries are characterized by the questions: who does this music or musician seem to address? With whom does this music or musician seem to seek a connection? We can contemplate how musicians engage with imaginaries using the method outlined by Beverly Diamond. Consider how they deploy language, musical style, and collaboration. In a textbook, the author poses more in-depth researchable questions about each of these factors. Many Indigenous musicians have built audiences that include both Native American and settlers. You can read about several artists representing various musical styles in the textbook. 2 albums by Robbie Robertson brought together Indigenous musicians from across the continent. Excuse me. Lastly, we get to an album, We Are the Hallucination, by Ottawa-based electronic musicians, A Tribe Called Red. This album engages Indigenous collaborators from the United States, Canada, and Europe. The recording is a conscious exercise in alliance building. both with Indigenous musicians from different tribes, countries, and continents, and with non-Indigenous communities. The last listening guide for this chapter analyzes Eanan, a track from the album. Maxida Märak employs joiking, which is from the Sami people, an indigenous group in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Russia. So if we just look at the method outlined by Beverly Diamond to understand how this track and album engage with specific imaginaries, in the language aspect, joik is entirely vocables. There's no specific language. It doesn't exclude anyone on this count. This is well suited to an endeavor that brings together participants from many different backgrounds. At the same time, vocables are very different from powwow singing. They connect to a very specific tradition. As far as style in Eanan, joik and electronic dance music are somewhat balanced. The whole album has electronic dance music that incorporates elements of traditional Indigenous styles. This addresses an Indigenous public while also hailing non-Indigenous listeners. And then the third aspect, collaboration. The album featured Indigenous artists from different communities, countries, and continents, and also non-Indigenous participants, including Ma's Deaf. Music seems directed toward Native and non-Native listeners who support contemporary Indigenous concerns. In an interview, a tribe called Red stated their music is directed primarily toward Indigenous peoples, but they welcome non-Indigenous listeners. So the last aspect of this lecture is for you to go listen to part 12.4 in Blackboard. It should open a Spotify link to listen in Spotify. And I hope you enjoyed this exploration and that you've listened to all of the musical examples. I wish I could just play them for you in the lecture, but I want to make sure I don't get any kind of strikes on YouTube. So please go ahead, and when we get to the listening guide, you can find it in your textbook or hit pause on this page and follow along. I would listen to it a few times so that you can identify and read through all of the musical events and follow along. And I hope you enjoyed learning about the music of Indigenous North America.